You're texting back and forth. The connection feels vibrant, and then without warning, dead silence. The person on the other end is gone. We tend to view this sudden vanishing act as calculated. The natural assumption is that the person doing the ghosting is cold, apathetic, and completely lacks respect for the relationship, and the fallout is real. Research tracking the emotional damage of ghosting shows that being on the receiving end triggers immediate spikes in anxiety, confusion, and a sharp drop in self-esteem. Because the recipient reads that silence as malicious intent, they naturally turn it inward. They interpret the sudden disappearance as a direct reflection of their own value. But recent psychological studies out of New York University point to a very different reality. The researchers wanted to see if the people doing the ghosting actually lacked empathy. The results run counter to our basic assumptions. People who initiate ghosting frequently rate themselves highly on caring about the other person's well-being. They aren't trying to inflict pain. Instead, they are trapped in an intense emotional conflict. On one side is a genuine fear of hurting the person they're talking to. On the other is an intense dread of facing an angry confrontation. This emotional gridlock usually starts out as procrastination. The person puts off sending a difficult breakup text, waiting for the right words, until so much time passes that responding at all feels impossible. The vanishing act rarely begins as a calculated rejection. It is typically a failure to navigate intense cognitive dissonance, the psychological stress of holding two conflicting fears at exactly the same time. To understand why that stress leads to silence, we have to look beneath the psychology and into the biology. When the brain registers an incoming, stressful text message, it treats it as an immediate physical threat. Researchers explain this process using the arousal appraisal model. It is a biological framework that maps exactly how our bodies regulate energy in response to stress. At a baseline level, a region of the brain called the amygdala continually generates energy, or arousal, to handle everyday demands. It provides the push we need to move from quiet contemplation into action. But a complex emotional threat, like ending a relationship, presents a unique problem. There is no physical action, like running away or fighting, that will actually solve an awkward social interaction. This section of the research highlights the amygdala's role in this exact moment. Because the brain doesn't distinguish between physical and social danger, it blindly pumps energy into the nervous system, pushing physical arousal far past what the body can effectively use. From the amygdala's perspective, the default solution to any difficulty is to add more energy. It acts like a hammer that sees every social conflict as a nail. Modern social conflicts force the brain to generate intense physical survival energy. With no acceptable physical outlet for that energy, the body becomes an unsustainable internal pressure cooker. What happens when this escalating emotional load completely exceeds the nervous system's capacity to process it? This excerpt details the biological solution. When the energetic demand threatens damage, the nervous system initiates an overload collapse to protect the organism. Operating like a circuit breaker, this shutdown restricts output. The person goes blank, detaches, and loses the ability to respond. That is the exact moment the parasympathetic nervous system takes over. It slams the brakes on the body's energy toward the freeze response. This freeze response is an automatic, involuntary biological reaction to feeling cornered. The person is not consciously choosing to be spiteful. The deafening silence of ghosting is often just the external echo of a nervous system that is completely shut down to survive an emotional overload. Proving that ghosting is a biological freeze response explains the behavior, but it does not erase the relational damage it causes. The person on the receiving end still experiences this protective shutdown as a sudden, traumatic abandonment, leaving them to grapple with profound insecurity. There is a tragic irony at play here. The exact biological mechanism that protects the ghoster's internal system actively destroys the interpersonal connection between the two people. For the person left behind, understanding this physiological overload can help remove the shame. It proves the silence was about the ghoster's overwhelmed capacity, not the victim's worth. While ghosting functions as an involuntary biological circuit breaker, true relational maturity requires upgrading our emotional wiring. We have to learn to manage our stress so our survival mechanisms don't leave others in the dark. Have you ever experienced this from either side? Comment below.